One question we get asked quite a lot is, can you recolour the leather in our cars? Well, the answer to that is yes and no. Mostly no. Usually people ask us this because they want to change the colour of the interior of the car. They've got a black and they want it red, or they want blue and they want it cream. That is not something we or anybody else should be doing. It's not going to end well, and there are other ways to do it. If you really have your heart set on changing the colour of the interior of your car, and bearing in mind you probably want the carpets and the dashboard and everything to match, is to find a donor car. Whatever car you've got, there's probably one written off somewhere that has an interior that you can swap over. So you need a donor car. Another way of doing it is the upholsterer or trimmer, or whatever you want to call them. They can buy kits, because leather on the interior of cars is not a natural thing. It's a highly industrialized process. Although it's leather and that's a natural material, they are mass produced. So you can get the leather kit, which is essentially the leather. It's all sewn together already. It's almost like a car cover. It's not something you can DIY because it's not finished. They still need to be attached to the seats, so that they're put over the seat parts, the padding and everything, and then sewn on. So it is a job for a trimmer. But that's probably one of the ways you could go. It's the same with if you've got damaged leather. Sometimes you get convertible cars that someone's left them out in the rain, and for some reason the leather's ruined. Although it doesn't happen very often on modern cars. You can get a leather kit. That would probably be the cheapest way of going about it. But when it comes to leather recolouring, what we can do is, if you do have a car where the leather has faded or stained, or it just looks tatty, yes, what you can do is you can recolour it back to if you've got a cream coloured interior and it's looking tatty, you can recolour the whole thing in a cream. I should really explain, like I say, leather's a natural material, but when we're talking about recolouring it, we're not going out and collecting acorns and tree bark, or sending out a tosher to collect buckets of tosh. It's not like the old days. This isn't saddle leather. What they do is, if you've got a very high-end car, they get leather from Scotland or Sweden or Scandinavia, where the cows are very well looked after. They don't use barbed wire up there. They use electric fences, and they get rid of all the parasites, so that when the leather arrives at the factory, it's absolutely pristine. But that's pretty rare nowadays. What they're doing is they're getting cow hides from China, and then they shave them. So they take slices of them, which is like a veneer. So out of one cow hide, you can turn that into 4 cow hides. So it's very, very thin, and then they laminate it on a backing. And because it's a cut surface, they will reprint it with like a leather texture, and then they repaint it, and then they probably put a coating over the top of it. So it's quite it's not the natural leather like you used to get on very old cars. So when we're recolouring a car interior, the leather, it is essentially painted. It's not that much different to if you took your car to a body shop to have a wing resprayed. The leather can be filled, it can be sanded, it can be painted, it can be varnished. The major difference here is the quality of the paint. You know, the paints they use on the exteriors of cars nowadays are acrylic, which is much more expensive than the old cellulose stuff they used to use anyway. But the paint, which they don't call paint, they call it pigment, that you put on a leather is very special stuff. Obviously, it has to have very special properties. It has to be UV resistant so it doesn't fade. It has to be extremely durable and hard wearing because you're sitting on it. It also has to be flexible. So it's very special stuff, and it can be quite pricey, which is why, you know, it's the difference is you can buy a kit online. Amazon or whatever has leather recoloring kits, and you know, I don't know what price they are, but they're fairly cheap. But we've seen those used in the past, and it's like someone's covered the car in like a latex paint, and it all peels off, and it's horrible stuff. The finish on it doesn't match, and of course the colour doesn't match because you know, unlike the exterior of a car where you can get on a computer and look up the paint codes and mix up the formula, you don't get that with leather. The leather technicians that do this professionally start off with the base colours, and they mix up the colour by eye, and you know, that can take as long as repainting the bolster or the seat base, whatever they're doing. They could spend a long time, you know, getting that colour right. Obviously it's not so difficult if you've got black, but you know, a cream is probably, they'll be mixing bits of purple and green into it to get that colour just right. So it's very much an art form. These are very skilled technicians. They're using very expensive material, so obviously recolouring leather is quite expensive. It's not a cheap job. You don't want to pay someone 30 quid to do it, and you don't want to be buying cheap kits off of Amazon and thinking that you can redo it. But it's very doable. We do quite a lot of them, especially seat bolsters, and especially on sports cars. If you've got a sports car that's low down, something like a Porsche or a Lotus, they can be quite difficult for us older people to get into. You have to get down and drag yourself across and drag yourself in, and as you're doing that and you're constantly dragging yourself over the bolster, which is the the edge of the upright of the seat and the seat base, they begin to wear. You'll notice that bit looks older and cracked, and you can actually wear through the pigment that's on there. If you start seeing that on your car, it's best to get it done fairly quickly. Don't leave it, because you know, if you've got some wear on there, we can recoat that and that will protect it. These paints are extremely hard wearing, but they also protect the leather, so it's best to get it done, because once that leather's exposed, you know, and it's getting moisture and stuff in it, that leather will begin to crack, and it starts losing its elasticity, and it will crack more, so you get a progressive kind of wearing of the seat bolster. And if it gets too far, it can't really be repaired. That in itself is not the end of the world, because then you can take it to a car trimmer, and what they will do is they will take the seat cover off, the leather cover off, they'll unstitch it, remove that panel and sew in a new panel, and then it needs to be recoloured. So they'll colour the whole seat so it all matches. And that's how it's done. But it's reasonably expensive, but it's not the end of the world. It's certainly worth doing. Certainly on higher end cars, if you've got a Porsche or a Bentley or a nice Mercedes, we do quite a lot of those. We also have done them on the little Fiat sports cars and stuff. They have a tendency for the the seats to sink, the padding, the underneath compresses, they can be fixed, and that's a nice desirable car. So that's what you can do, is you can recolour it the same colour, but if you want to change the colour of the interior of your car, get a donor car and just swap the whole interior over.